Hi folks, my name is Patrick Nuri. I'm with Northwest Treasures Geology. And what we do is build geology kits complete with curricula and the specimens for grades pre-K through 12. Today I want to give you 4 powerful words to help you and your kids work through the changing culture that's going on around us. Now, if you can learn these 4 words and keep them straight, then I really feel like these will help you not only keep your faith straight, but also develop your ability to persuade others. So let's begin. In 1949, English novelist George Orwell wrote a science fiction novel entitled 1984. Some of you may have read this. It's really a novel about truth and facts and politics and the ways in which they're manipulated. The book has turned out to be almost prophetic in what's going on today. We do live in an Orwellian 1984 type of culture where words are getting redefined so fast that unless you can understand the new dictionary, you'll get lost very easily. Now, this is nowhere more evident than in morality and in science. Today, science defines everything. One of the worst crimes that you can be accused of today is that you are a science denier. So, and yet, hardly anyone is asking the obvious question, and that is, what is science? Today, science has become whatever scientists say it is. Even here, the definitions are changing, and they're changing rapidly. In my field of geology and paleontology, I have witnessed lots of change in meanings and definitions over the past 50 years, things that I once believed as a kid because I was taught these things in secular geology no longer are embraced today. Now, of course, the argument is, well, that's really the nature of science, always changing to fit the facts. And that's really hardly true. There's some degree of truth in that, especially as we have been able to look at things like genetics. Things are changing rapidly there, not because of ideas, but because of science technology. But especially in the field of geology, where most of the so-called Earth history has not been observed, it is a set of ideas that has been changing. The so-called facts of science have consisted of changing opinions masquerading as scientific fact. And most of the time, we are just simply unaware of it. One of the greatest casualties of this modern movement that we're experiencing today, redefining our culture and its language, is a believer's commitment to the scripture as the definer of all things. Proverbs chapter 23 verse 10 warns, "Do not move the ancient boundary." Of course, the first meaning is in reference to geographical markers. In dividing up the promised land, God gave definite markers for inheritance, and these were to be respected and to remain in place. An ancient boundary also provided security and the basis for rights. In fact, the next part of the verse states, "And do not go into the fields of the fatherless." The ancient boundary was to be respected throughout generations long after the patriarch was gone. There is an uncanny resemblance here to our present culture. While the ancient boundaries are being moved all over the place, So is our security and the basis for being apologists for the faith. In educating our children, part of our work involves preparing them for a job and preparing them in academics. But ideas about jobs and academics change constantly. Part of the plan for educating our children should be to equip them thoroughly in a biblical worldview. This never changes. Now, some of the things that this involves are there is a God, and we're accountable to him, and we're accountable to what he's spoken. A knowledge of our spiritual roots. We were created by and for him, not for ourselves. A knowledge of sin and why it has destroyed God's creation. A knowledge of salvation of Jesus Christ, our Savior, and our eternal destiny. And a sense of our mission here on earth, why we're here in the first place. Our job with our kids is one of equipping, not just educating in academics. And this brings me to apologetics. And in fact, this is what apologetics is all about. It's not just involving doctrine, but apologetics is really presenting a defense in order to persuade to a particular choice. We're helping them fulfill one of the purposes for their creation when we train our children in apologetics. When I teach geology, I'm constantly reminding my students that understanding the subject of geology is like learning a language. Understanding the definitions and how they shift around is a big part of learning geology. So what I'd like to do here is to give you 4 powerful words to help you navigate the shifting culture and especially the language in the sciences. We're going to keep it simple. I think if you can just learn 4 words, these 4 powerful words, I think you're going to be a lot better prepared and a lot better equipped to understand what's going on. So let's start off with defining the first powerful word, defining the word science. Science is from a Latin word that means knowledge. It replaced the Greek word gnosis that's used in the New Testament. And it is knowledge gained by observation, testing, and repetition of those tests. This means that science has definite limits as to what it can accomplish. Science has definite boundaries within which it has the authority to speak. Science, by definition, cannot answer the burning questions we have about origins. A scientist can give his opinions about origins, but he cannot call them science. When we violate these limitations, we can easily come up with something called scientism, which involves belief. And because of this belief, people have been led to believe in the power of science to answer all questions. So equipping our kids to think critically about statements made by scientists protects their faith and makes them better scientists and apologists. One of the simple ways to do this is to help our children examine the so-called scientific statements and ask the question, how much of the statement is actual science? How much of the statement has been observed, tested, and repeated? It's a simple process, but one that takes a great deal of work to develop a habit in it. As we're dealing with science, we've got to ask the question and discern here the difference between facts and opinions or ideas. Of course, you're going to hear the objection, well, Genesis is not science either. Well, exactly. And that's the point we're trying to make. All we're doing is defining the limits to science. Science deals with the present. It is extremely limited when trying to solve the mysteries of the unobserved past. The subjects of Origins is about the past, not the present. To discuss the mysteries of Origins, we need to define the second powerful word here, and that is history. History deals with unique, one-time events supported by eyewitnesses and historical documents. Our modern world mixes two very important but very different subjects together. And this has been one of the major reasons why there's a war between science and religion. Those two words are earth science, which have to do with observation in the present. That could be mineral makeup. It could be rock identification, testing for density and hardness, identifying fossils. But that's earth science. There's another part of this that's called earth history, and that deals with origins. Now, geology is the study of the earth, and of necessity entails both earth science and earth history. But only one of these is science, and we need to help our children discern the difference. Earth history involves a different framework, totally different framework, a framework of documents and eyewitness accounts. The Bible presents itself as a history of origins, backed by eyewitnesses and accounts. Most believers in the Bible do not know it well enough to even present a simple defense. Secular students of earth history, on the other hand, are trained in their secular framework, which is the geological timetable. And they know theirs backwards and forwards, and they're able to use it to interpret rock layers and fossils and so on. And we as Bible believers don't really know our framework, and so we can't use it. So, can we as believers in biblical history use our own framework to offer a good explanation for the origin of rocks, fossils, and landforms? Now, this takes time and takes discipline, but it begins with a determination, first of all, to know our biblical framework. The third powerful word in apologetics is this: philosophy. Philosophy is an interpretation of evidence. Much of Earth history consists of interpretations of fossils and volcanoes and so on. And interpretations are often confused with the science facts. For example, take this statement: dinosaurs died out from an asteroid collision with the Earth 65 million years ago. That's presented as a fact of science. Helping our kids learn to discern the difference between interpretation and the fact in this statement will make them good apologists, make them good scientists too, because they'll be asking the right questions. The fourth powerful word in apologetics is consensus. Consensus is group agreement. that may have nothing to do with fact. Our kids know this better as peer influence or peer pressure. You've heard the statement, "You're an idiot." All scientists worth their salt say that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. Well, that doesn't make it fact. That makes it consensus, and maybe consensus held by a lot of scientists, but it doesn't make it true. And our kids need to be able to discern this. Are we shamed into an acceptance of this statement, even though it is just a consensus among modern scientists? Can we detect the consensus mentality and keep ourselves within the boundaries of critical thinking? That's the big challenge, isn't it? 4 powerful words in apologetics: science, that which is observable, testable, and repeatable; history, dealing with one-time unique events supported by eyewitnesses and historical documents; philosophy, interpretation of the evidence; and consensus, group agreement, even in spite of the facts. We have some resources we'd like to offer you. You can find these resources at northwestrockandfossil.com. One of them is this booklet we call 4 Powerful Words. It's kind of an expansion of what I just talked to you about today. And not only does it have a review of the 4 powerful words that I gave you today, but it also has several exercises your children can do and learn how to develop their critical thinking, things concerning the big questions we get asked about the Bible and Genesis. And that is 4 Powerful Words in Apologetics. It's a good resource. It's easy reading and a good textbook for kids. And for you parents, because I'm sure you've got the same questions your kids have. Another good book, again about the same size as 4 Powerful Words in Apologetics, is this book called Genesis Rock Solid. And it really is, some of it is really part of my own testimony, how I went from belief to unbelief and back to belief again. And some of the mistakes and compromise the church has made over the last couple hundred years when they started to really get hit with this, with changing culture and definitions and so on. And it's happening again today. Anyway, it's a good, I think it'd be a good textbook for your kids to have. The third resource I wanted to talk to you about is something I've developed, put together to help kids develop especially observational skills and interpretive skills. Today, these are taught as one in earth science classes, but I want students to be able to sort out the difference between these two, and so I've developed a lab kit called the Geology Lab Kit. And in it, there are bunches of projects and samples. There's even some equipment you can use to test hardness, some of the other properties of minerals such as density and specific gravity. These are things that kids can learn and develop their particular science skills and see the difference between conclusions that are drawn because of observation and conclusions that are drawn because of interpretation. And it's good to develop both. It's good to be able to recognize both. So recapping the 4 powerful words in apologetics, there is 1, science, and science involves observation, testing, and repetition of those tests, being able to reproduce results. 2, history, one-time unique historical events that are backed by eyewitness accounts and historical documents. Number 3, philosophy, which has to do with opinions about evidence or interpreting the evidence based upon biases. And 4, the word consensus, and that is group agreement in spite of the facts. So I hope this has helped you today, and I hope you check out these resources. God bless you, and I hope these help.